Ever wake up one morning, step outside with your coffee, and wonder if your lawn secretly relocated to the Amazon rainforest overnight? That was me, Ethan Granger, 36, solo homeowner in Sunset Vale, Oregon, 3 weeks ago. The ground was soaked, puddles everywhere. My hose was warm to the touch like it had been used just minutes before. Now, I live alone. No kids. No roommates. Definitely no garden gnomes siphoning water for some mythical underground community. Just me, my caffeine, and apparently a lawn that waters itself. At first, I assumed maybe the sprinkler timer had gone haywire, until I remembered I didn't even own sprinklers. Just one lonely hose coiled by the spigot. That's when things got weirder. My water bill had spiked. Not crept, not nudged, spiked like I was running an Olympic-sized pool party every night. But I wasn't. The only thing in my backyard was a half-dead tomato plant and a rusted-out grill. So where the hell was the water going? I started asking neighbors. Everyone in Sunset Vale was pleasant enough, except for one. Margot Ellison, 49. She'd only moved in a couple of months ago but strutted around like she was the CEO of the street. Clipboard always in hand, she inspected lawns, judged mailboxes, and once yelled at the UPS guy for parking too assertively. She wasn't even on the Sunset Vale Neighborhood Council, but you wouldn't know it. I didn't want to believe she'd stooped to theft until I saw it with my own eyes. It was a Saturday. I just returned from the grocery store, bag still in the back seat. And there she was, Margot, in a floral blouse and oversized sun hat, dragging my hose across my yard. She hooked it up to a portable pressure washer and started blasting her porch like she paid the utilities. She looked up, smiled, and shouted, "Hope you don't mind. Just a quick rinse." I sat in my car, stunned. I didn't even respond. I couldn't. My brain was still trying to load the file titled, "Did she really just say that?" Later that afternoon, I took a breath and walked over to her place, 127, Golden Elm Lane. I knocked politely, asked if maybe she was having issues with her water line. She laughed. "Oh no," she said. "I just like your hose better. Great pressure. And anyway, isn't it all community property?" Community property? I nearly choked. Last I checked, this wasn't a commune. The water wasn't a gift from the heavens. It was billed directly to me. I told her, as calmly as I could, that I didn't appreciate her using my hose without permission. She tilted her head, smiled like a kindergarten teacher, and said, "Well, I'm sure the council won't mind. We're all supposed to be good neighbors, right?" Then she closed the door. Just like that. Conversation over. Now, I'm not the yelling type. I'm not dramatic. I like order. Solutions. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I emailed the Sunset Vale Neighborhood Council. I included photos, a copy of my water bill, and a short, respectful message asking for clarification on this whole shared utilities policy. 3 days later, I got a reply. "Thank you for your concern. At this time, we encourage all neighbors to resolve minor disputes amicably without council intervention." Translation, you're on your own. Fine. So I took matters into my own hands. Bought a lock for the hose. Simple, discreet, problem solved. Or so I thought. The next morning, the lock was gone. Not picked. Not broken. Cleanly cut. Someone had used bolt cutters. I stood there, staring at the sliced metal like it was part of a crime scene. I even looked for fingerprints, like I'd know what to do if I found any. But deep down, I already knew. I looked across the street, and there she was, Margot again, smug as ever, pressure washing her SUV like it was starring in a car commercial. Water splashing everywhere. She saw me. Waved. "That lock was a tripping hazard," she called out. I didn't yell. Didn't scream. But something inside me snapped. I wasn't just annoyed, I was done. And that, right there, was the moment the war began. She was out there again, Margot Ellison, 49, in full smug glory, washing her SUV like she was filming a luxury car commercial. Water flew everywhere, arcing into the air as if it came from a magical, free-flowing spring. Except it wasn't free. It was coming straight out of my wallet. I stepped outside, this time not bothering with the friendly neighbor act. "Margot," I said, voice tight, "what happened to the lock on my hose?" She barely looked up. "Oh, that thing," she chirped. "It was a safety hazard. Someone could have tripped. I took care of it." Then she smiled, flipped her perfectly curled hair, and went back to scrubbing her tires like nothing had happened. No shame. No remorse. Just pure entitlement. I turned around and walked back inside, my face burning with disbelief. I sat down on the couch and stared at the wall for 10 minutes straight, wondering how the hell this had become my life. Ethan Granger, 36, was now financing Margot's driveway spa sessions. The Sunset Vale Neighborhood Council wouldn't do a damn thing. They'd made that clear. And Margot? She was untouchable. That's when I had the idea. If I couldn't stop her, maybe I could catch her. Document it. Shame her. I didn't need the council. I needed evidence. So, I bought a tiny motion-activated security camera and tucked it just beneath the gutter near the spigot. Out of sight, but perfectly aimed. 2 days later, I had her. Crystal clear footage. Margot sneaking into my yard like a cartoon villain, dragging my hose away with the same smug grin she wore every morning. And then, a full-on Margot production. She watered her flower beds, filled a kiddie pool, and washed her golden retriever. All before I had even had my first sip of coffee. I posted a 30-second clip on the local Sunset Vale forum with the title, "Neighbor Steals My Water Every Morning." I didn't expect much, but the video exploded. Comments poured in. Outrage, sympathy, laughter. One guy even sent me a link to a motion-triggered sprinkler designed to soak intruders. But the best part? Margot saw it. I knew because the next morning, she was on my doorstep. No sun hat. No smile. Just rage. "You're violating my privacy," she snapped. "You're threatening my reputation and creating a hostile environment." I stood my ground. "You're violating my property, stealing my water, and putting the financial burden on me." She crossed her arms and said the dumbest thing I've ever heard. "Do something about it. I dare you." That was the moment everything changed. That dare lit a fire in me I didn't even know I had. No more playing nice. No more emails. No more locks. She wanted to play games? Fine. I was done holding back. But revenge needed planning. I wasn't going to strike blindly. First, I needed to know how far she'd go. Was she only using the hose when I wasn't home? Or was she bold enough to steal water no matter what? So I took a day off work. Stayed home. Blinds drawn. Coffee in hand. Watching. At exactly 10:32 a.m., I heard it. The soft hiss of the spigot. The dragging of the hose. I peeked through the blinds. There she was again. Yoga pants. That smug look. Spraying down her driveway like it was her personal car wash. This time, I walked outside with my phone in hand, pretending to text. She saw me, paused for a heartbeat, then carried on like I didn't exist. Didn't flinch. Didn't care. As if to say, "You can't stop me." When she finished, she waved the hose at me and said, "See? Works great. You should thank me for keeping it in shape." I forced a smile and walked back inside, but my blood was boiling. That afternoon, I uploaded the new footage to a Sunset Vale Facebook group, this time with a snappier title. Local Margot turns neighbor's hose into her personal water park. The post went viral. People laughed. People fumed. People shared. Within hours, the video spread beyond Sunset Vale. Reddit, YouTube, even TikTok got a hold of it. And now Margot wasn't just a neighborhood nuisance. She was internet famous. I didn't know it yet, but that video was only the beginning. The war for the hose had just begun. The post went live with the title, "Local Margot turns neighbor's hose into personal water park," and within hours, the comments came flooding in. Everyone in Sunset Vale seemed to have a Margot story. But mine struck a nerve. People laughed. Some mocked her. Others suggested punishments ranging from legal action to installing a moat. A few even offered pro bono legal advice. But the loudest voices? They were furious. Not just at Margot Ellison, 49, but at the Sunset Vale Neighborhood Council for doing nothing. The video didn't just stay local. It hit Reddit. It hit YouTube. It reached gardening groups, HOA complaint threads, even Facebook mom collectives. Strangers from all over the country tagged friends and said things like, "You need to try this with your HOA, Karen." And Margot? Oh, she noticed. The next morning, I looked through my blinds and saw her standing on her front lawn, 127, Golden Elm Lane, flanked by 2 neighborhood council board members. She was pointing dramatically at my house, making wild gestures like she was delivering closing arguments in a courtroom drama. I swear she even wiped a fake tear. A few hours later, I got a letter slipped into my mailbox. Formal letterhead. All caps. Official tone. A warning. You are hereby advised that unauthorized surveillance and hostile behavior toward fellow residents is a violation of Sunset Vale Neighborhood Council policy. I almost laughed. Hostile behavior? I hadn't even raised my voice. They were more upset about me recording the theft than about the theft itself. That was the moment I realized I was done playing by the rules. If the system wasn't going to help me, I was going to build a system of my own. I spent the evening brainstorming. Alarms? No. Too obvious. Fake warning signs? Not enough. Pranks? Tempting, but I wanted something more. I needed poetic justice. Something unforgettable. And then fate handed it to me. I was driving past a construction site near the edge of Sunset Vale when I spotted a crew installing a massive industrial sewage tank, the kind used for temporary toilets and waste containment. The second I saw it, the idea struck like lightning. I pulled over, struck up a casual conversation with one of the workers, told him I was a homeowner experimenting with drainage options. He laughed, skeptical but friendly. After a little back and forth and a handshake with a folded 20, he agreed to let me test a hose hookup for a single night. Back home, I got to work. I pulled out my tools and built a small adapter that connected my spigot to a second hose. One I ran underground, behind some bushes, and directly into the tank. From the outside, it looked like any other hose setup. Nothing unusual. But the moment someone turned that spigot, expecting crisp water, they'd get a surprise. A brown, putrid, eye-watering surprise. I tested it, carefully, with a sealed bucket. The smell alone could clear a city block. My heart pounded with excitement and horror. It was disgusting. It was dramatic. It was perfect. That night, under cover of darkness, I armed the trap. I left the main hose right where Margot always found it. The bait was set. The trap was primed. And just as I expected, at exactly 10:31 a.m. the next morning, I heard it. The familiar hiss of the spigot. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone. There she was, dragging the hose across the yard like she owned the block. No glances over the shoulder. No hesitation. She was that confident. That entitled. She hooked the hose to one of those rotating garden sprinklers, the fancy kind that sprays in a wide arc, and set it right in the middle of her perfectly manicured lawn. She twisted the spigot. At first, nothing but a sputter. A gurgle. Confusion flickered across her face. Then it hit. A thick, dark jet of sewage shot out, spraying across the grass, her patio, and most gloriously, her pristine white wicker furniture. The sprinkler rotated, once, twice, and then the screaming started. I heard it through my walls. Margot shrieked like she'd been hit by a tsunami of death. She slipped on the wet grass, flailed her arms, and scrambled toward the spigot. Too late. The sprinkler had done a full rotation. A second blast nailed her shins. By now, neighbors were stepping out, wide-eyed. One man dropped his coffee. Someone started filming. Margot was covered, screaming, coughing, wrestling the hose like it was a live snake. It was everything I hoped for, and more. Margot Ellison, 49, was screaming, coughing, flailing. And best of all, there were witnesses. Real, live, stunned-on-their-lawn witnesses who saw every second of her getting blasted by the nastiest sprinkler surprise Sunset Vale had ever seen. I watched the whole thing unfold on my camera feed, my morning coffee forgotten, savoring each glorious second. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was performance art. Later that day, I strolled outside, pretending to check my mailbox. Right on cue, Margot spotted me. She stormed across the street, sludge still smeared on her legs and sandals hanging by threads. Her hair was plastered to her forehead like she'd just walked through a sewer, which, in fairness, wasn't far from the truth. "You're gonna regret this," she shouted. "Lawsuits. Biohazards. You threatened me." I didn't flinch. I just gave her a calm smile and said, "You told me to do something about it." So I did. Her face cycled through red, green, and back to red like a malfunctioning traffic light. She stomped off, yelling about the neighborhood council. As she stormed across her soggy lawn, I called after her. "Be sure to tell them the water wasn't stolen this time." That night, I uploaded the footage. And within hours, it broke the internet. Margot wasn't just infamous on our block anymore. She was globally meme-worthy. By morning, the tone in Sunset Vale had changed. People weren't just whispering anymore. They were laughing. Openly. One neighbor literally snorted coffee from his nose at the sight of Margot's slow-motion sewage scream, complete with dramatic violins someone had edited in. I hadn't even posted the footage myself. Someone else did, likely one of the neighbors who caught it live. I could tell from the angle it was shot from the upper balcony across the street. Within 12 hours, it hit Reddit, TikTok, and even a few Facebook mom groups with titles like When Margos Get What They Deserve and Neighborhood Justice, Sprinkler Edition. As satisfying as it was, I knew better than to celebrate early. That sewage stunt? That was only phase 1. See, Margot wasn't the kind of person to reflect and apologize. If anything, the chaos had only fed her thirst for retaliation. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was pressure building behind her curtain-drawn windows. Sure enough, that afternoon, a stiff, official-looking envelope showed up at my door. The kind with bold letters and hollow threats. Inside was a 3-page letter filled with legal jargon and all-caps accusations. Intentional sabotage, personal endangerment, biological assault. She even claimed her dog had fallen ill, despite clear video proof that the animal never got within 30 feet of the sprinkler zone. I almost felt bad for her lawyer, if she had one, because anyone who read the full story would have laughed her out of the courtroom. Still, I didn't brush it off. That letter told me all I needed to know. Margot wasn't going to stop. So I started planning phase 2. No pranks this time. No theatrics. This would be precise. Permanent. The final shutdown. First, I upgraded the camera system. I added 2 more motion sensor cams around the side yard, and 1 directly above the spigot, tucked into a fake birdhouse. Total 360 degrees coverage. I wanted eyes everywhere. Then I paid another visit to the construction crew near the neighborhood edge. Dropped off a stack of pizzas and a cooler of sodas. We chatted like old friends. They still thought I was experimenting with organic fertilizer flow. I didn't correct them. Back home, I went full engineer mode. I rebuilt the entire hose rig. The original setup was fine, but this time, I added a remote switch in the garage that toggled between regular water flow and the sewage tank. It was underground, seamless, hidden beneath a fresh patch of sod. To the untrained eye, just another lawn accessory. It was ridiculous. It was overkill. And I didn't care. If Margot dared to steal water again, she'd never know what she was turning on. Clean stream or horror show. It was now a game of Russian roulette with a hose. But then something unexpected happened. Margot disappeared. Not literally, but she vanished from the street. For 2 full days. No noise, no hoses, no clipboard patrols. Curtains drawn. Her SUV unmoved. Her front porch still covered in dried sewage. It was too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your gut twist. On the 3rd day it hit. A fine. A real, printed, notarized fine from the Sunset Vale Neighborhood Council slipped into my mailbox. Not a warning. Not a suggestion. A fine for creating a hazardous environment. And just like that, phase 3 began. It was official. I'd been fined $600. The letter from the Sunset Vale Neighborhood Council claimed I had violated community health protocols and intentionally created a hazardous environment for a fellow resident. I stood in my kitchen, gripping the paper like it might change if I stared hard enough. I called the council office immediately, demanded an explanation, and got passed between 3 different board members. Eventually, one admitted what I already suspected. Margot Ellison, 49, had filed a formal complaint, complete with photographic evidence and 2 so-called witnesses. According to her, I had threatened her with a chemical attack. I couldn't even laugh. It was too surreal, too perfectly absurd. I offered to send over the full camera footage, time-stamped. I even had documentation from the construction site showing that the hose, my hose, was accessed solely from my property. The board gave me the usual runaround and said they'd review it at the next scheduled meeting. And when was that meeting? Next month. That's when it hit me. This was a setup. Margot wasn't just angry, she was strategic. She knew the Sunset Vale system. Slow, bureaucratic, and easy to manipulate if you looked official enough. And she was using it like a shield. But she made one critical mistake. She thought I'd just roll over. Pay the fine. Stay quiet. Maybe move on. She had no idea I was already digging deeper. Over the next few days, I poured through public records, HOA bylaws, even made a trip to the county clerk's office. It wasn't obsession, it was precision. If they were going to bury me in red tape, I was going to bury them in facts. And then I found it. Section 4.2b of the Sunset Vale Neighborhood Council Handbook. Any homeowner caught trespassing on another resident's property without express permission, particularly for the use of utilities, will be subject to immediate investigation, fines, and potential removal from HOA privileges. That was it. The golden ticket. Margot had walked onto my property more times than I could count. I had video. I had timestamps. I had real witnesses, unlike her imaginary ones. I printed everything, stapled it into a thick packet, and mailed copies not only to the council, but to a few select neighbors who I knew had also crossed paths with Margot. I wasn't starting a war. I was starting a rebellion. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. It was Brian Cole, 42, the soft-spoken guy 2 houses down with the backyard hammock Margot had once filed a complaint about, saying the fabric was too visually aggressive. He'd had enough. He thanked me for standing up. Then another neighbor joined. Then another. Stories began spilling out, complaints, citations, fake violations. Margot had made enemies everywhere. I had just lit the match. The whole street came alive with whispered plans and shared screenshots. People were passing around the sewage video like trading cards, laughing and bonding over her downfall. Then came the final blow. Someone leaked audio from a private council meeting. Margot's voice, unmistakable, filled the room. She ranted about jealous neighbors and targeted harassment, insisting she was the only one upholding neighborhood standards. Her tone? Indignant. Entitled. Delusional. Paired with the now viral sewage footage, it was a 1-2 punch. A perfect storm. 2 days later, Margot emerged from 127 Golden Elm Lane for the first time since the sprinkler incident. No clipboard. No sun hat. No makeup. Just dark sunglasses and shaky steps. She didn't yell. She didn't steal water. She climbed into her car and drove away without looking at anyone. And for the first time in weeks, Sunset Vale was quiet. It felt peaceful, like it used to be before she arrived. But I wasn't naive enough to believe it was over. People like Margot don't just disappear. They retreat, regroup, scheme. That's why I kept the remote valve switch active. Why the camera system remained online, watching every angle 24/7. If she ever tried again, I'd be ready. Because this wasn't about water anymore. It was about boundaries. And Margot had finally learned the hard way. That mine came with consequences. The following 3 days were eerily silent. Her house sat frozen, like it had been sealed in quarantine. No car movement. No garden hose. No thumping porch music. It felt like a trap. Because if I knew Margot, and unfortunately, I did, she wasn't finished. She was waiting. Margot Ellison, 49, wasn't the type to back down, not out of courage, but because losing control was her worst nightmare. And after the sewage sprinkler incident, she'd lost everything. Her spotless patio, her dignity, and her self-appointed crown as queen of the cul-de-sac. So when I heard a knock on my door just after lunch, I didn't flinch. I already knew it was her. What I didn't expect was the entourage. Standing on my porch were 2 board members from the Sunset Vale Neighborhood Council, one holding a clipboard, the other clutching a thick folder like they were about to prosecute a federal case. Margot was dressed like she was on a legal drama set. Stiff blazer, sunglasses perched on her head, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her jaw was clenched, her eyes locked on mine like she'd been rehearsing a takedown speech for days. The clipboard guy cleared his throat. We're here to discuss an escalating property dispute and a potential biohazard incident. I raised an eyebrow and asked, would you like to come inside? Before they could answer, Margot snapped, no, I don't feel safe in his home. I didn't laugh, not out loud, but inside, I nearly choked. This was her last act. Her final push to flip the narrative. She was trying to go out as a victim. They handed me a formal complaint, 3 pages long, filled with dramatic language and accusations. Margot claimed I had weaponized sewage, created an environmental hazard, and emotionally traumatized her through a coordinated public shaming campaign. She even claimed the stench had seeped into the foundation of her home, permanently altering the energy of her living space. I let them speak, nodded occasionally, waited for the moment I knew was coming. Margot demanded I pay for the cleanup of her lawn and patio, issue a formal apology, and attend a conflict resolution session organized by the council. I held up one finger and said, I have something to show you. I stepped inside and returned with a thick folder of my own. Timestamps, screenshots, water bills, footage of Margot trespassing across my lawn, again and again, dragging my hose like it was hers. I even included a copy of the council's own bylaw, Section 4.2b, highlighted in blinding neon yellow. No homeowner may trespass or use another resident's utilities without express permission. The man with the clipboard flipped through the pages. His brows furrowed. The other board member leaned in and whispered something. And just like that, the energy shifted. Margot's confidence cracked. She interrupted, claiming the videos were fake, that I was stalking her, that I'd been hostile for months. But her voice trembled, and her eyes darted between the pages. The board members said they needed time to review the evidence. They would call a special session within the week. Margot demanded immediate action. This time, no one even responded. As they turned to leave, Margot looked back at me one last time. Her voice dropped, low and sharp, almost trembling. "I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." I smiled and replied, "They already do." She stomped back to 127, Golden Elm Lane, muttering under her breath. That night, I posted a clear, fact-based summary on the same Sunset Vale forum where the sewage video had first gone viral. No sarcasm, no exaggeration, just the truth, how she trespassed, how she used my water, how I followed every proper channel until the system failed, and how I defended my property when no one else would. The response was overwhelming. People rallied behind me, shared their own Margot stories. One neighbor offered to mow my lawn for free as a thank you. Another left a warm pie on my porch with a sticky note that read, "You're a legend." 2 days later, Sunset Vale changed forever. And I knew this wasn't just about my hose anymore. It was about drawing the line when no one else would. The line Margot finally learned not to cross. The special Sunset Vale Neighborhood Council meeting wasn't open to the public, but word spread faster than wildfire. Margot Ellison, 49, arrived looking like she was preparing for trial, stack of printed documents in hand, a folder thick enough to block sunlight. She claimed it contained legal threats, evidence of harassment, and medical records proving emotional damage. But as soon as the board reviewed my footage, the bylaws, and neighbor testimonials, her entire case collapsed under its own bloated drama. The council issued an official warning. She was fined $500 for repeated trespassing and unauthorized utility use. They made it clear that any future infractions would result in suspension of her Sunset Vale privileges. They didn't apologize to me directly, but the message was clear. They were backpedaling from the blind support they once gave her. Margot had finally become what every HOA fears most, a liability. And just like that, her little fan club? Gone. The board member who always took her side quietly resigned the following week. The neighbors who used to smile at her vanished. The queen of passive-aggressive notes and flowerbed violations was dethroned. Now, when she walked her dog, it wasn't with pride, it was with her head down, sunglasses on, avoiding eye contact. Her once immaculate driveway sat dull and unwashed. Her porch, once full of decorative lanterns and loud opinions, was dusty and silent. And the hose? She never touched it again. But even in defeat, Margot wasn't done. In one last sad attempt to strike back, she filed a formal complaint with the city, claiming I had illegally installed a sewage connection in my yard. That's when Inspector Dana Holt, 45, showed up. She walked around the property, asked a few questions, then took one look at the hidden rig and burst out laughing. "Relax," she said, still chuckling. "There's no violation here. It's not permanent. It's genius, honestly." She even joked off the record, "If more people handled neighborhood drama like this, I'd be out of a job." I offered her a bottle of water. She smirked and said, "Only if it's not from that hose." By then, the video had crossed the 4 million view mark online. I started getting emails from journalists, podcasts, and even one guy who wanted to sell shirts that said, "Hose Justice." The neighborhood treated me like a folk hero. But I didn't feel heroic. I felt relieved. After weeks of insanity, my world had finally quieted down. Still, I wasn't foolish enough to fully relax. People like Margot don't just go away. They regroup. They wait. They come back louder. So, I kept the remote valve switch installed. The camera system stayed live, watching all angles. I even set out a brand new hose, coiled perfectly, shiny, and inviting. Not because I thought she'd try again, but because if she did, I'd be ready. Everyone on the block knew. If Margot ever touched my hose again, she'd better bring a hazmat suit. Nearly a month passed since the great sewage storm hit 127, Golden Elm Lane. Her house, Once the epicenter of noise complaints, unsolicited advice, and HOA-fueled drama, now sat like a crumbling monument to suburban tyranny. The porch lights never came on. The curtains stayed drawn. Not once did her garden sandals dare touch my grass. And the hose? It lay there like a battle-worn veteran, sunlight glinting off its coils, resting after a hard-fought campaign. For the first time in ages, my mornings were still. No more spikes in the water bill. No more anxiety over gardening tools. No more feeling like a trespasser on my own property. Life had returned to normal, or at least something close to it. Neighbors didn't just nod anymore. They smiled. They waved. They walked over to chat. Brian Cole, the hammock guy, even invited me to a backyard barbecue. And one morning, I found a gold-colored hose nozzle left on my porch. No note. No name. Just a quiet tribute from someone who understood poetic justice when they saw it. Online, the saga took on a life of its own. The video kept spreading. Memes were born. People stitched their own HOA horror stories onto mine. One guy made a parody song set to dramatic opera using the footage. Someone else created an animated retelling in graphic novel style, complete with exaggerated cartoon versions of Margot and me. And every few days, I'd get a message from a stranger saying the same thing. Thank you for standing up to the madness. Somewhere out there, across the country, across oceans even, people were messaging me, saying, thank you for standing up to HOA madness. Others shared how my story gave them the final push to confront their own neighborhood tyrants. I never asked for any of it. I didn't want the spotlight. But I won't lie, it felt good. Still, I never let my guard down. Margot Ellison, 49, had gone quiet. But quiet didn't mean defeated. It meant waiting. And sure enough, one evening just after sunset, I found an envelope slipped under my front door. No return address. No stamp. Just a single, neatly folded sheet of paper. The note was short, handwritten in the same unmistakable angry cursive I'd seen on every Sunset Vale complaint form she'd ever submitted. You may have won this time, but this neighborhood won't be yours forever. I'll be back, stronger. I didn't laugh because it was funny. I laughed because it was so on brand. Dramatic. Vague. Completely ineffective. It was classic Margot. The next morning, a moving truck appeared outside 127 Golden Elm Lane. No warning. No goodbye. Just movers silently packing her potted plants, her sun-faded patio chairs, and that hideous pink flamingo she used to keep by the mailbox like a warning sign. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't slam a door or cause a scene. She simply vanished. By the end of the week, the house was listed for sale. And within days, a young couple with a toddler moved in. On their very first day, they came over with cookies, smiled warmly, and asked, politely, if it was okay to use their hose hookup. I nearly cried from the normalcy. But the story didn't end there. A week later, I got an email from a guy named Lucas Mendez, 34. He lived in another HOA across town and had somehow, tragically, ended up with Margot as his new neighbor. Apparently, she wasted no time getting back to her usual tricks. First, it was complaints about someone's wind chimes. Then she scolded a neighbor for letting their cat walk across her front steps. And finally, inevitably, she was seen dragging someone else's hose across their yard to wash her car. Lucas had found me through the viral video. Any advice? He asked. I didn't hold back. I sent him everything, setup diagrams for the remote valve system, the camera brands I used, and even a document I'd created during my crusade called the Margot Defense Protocol. He replied with 3 words. This means war. Days passed with no update. Then, one evening, I got a link. Lucas had gone above and beyond. Instead of sewage, he used a mixture of compost tea and expired liquid fertilizer, completely organic but outrageously foul. And yes, Margot got sprayed. Again. Only this time, it happened in front of half a dozen neighborhood kids riding scooters. She screamed, slipped, and landed in a thorny rosebush with a thud that echoed through the neighborhood. The footage wasn't as cinematic as mine, but it was pure gold. Within 48 hours, people online were calling it Margot's Revenge, Part 2. It was hilarious. It was ridiculous. And it confirmed what I'd started to suspect. Margot wasn't just a problem. She was a traveling circus of entitlement. But now, thanks to the internet, every time she struck, someone was ready to strike back. After that, I decided to channel everything into something bigger. I started a blog, The Suburban Chronicles. I wrote about ridiculous HOA encounters, neighborhood power trips, and suburban drama so absurd it practically wrote itself. I never named names directly, but let's just say everyone knew who the hose queen was. I turned the camera footage into a mini-series and invited anonymous story submissions. The blog took off faster than I expected. People were tired of being pushed around in their own yards. Somehow, my absurd water war had become a flag for the fed up. I even made a few t-shirts. Slogans like HO before brothers and justice flows were oddly popular. But my favorite moment? It wasn't the views, or the memes, or the emails from strangers. It was a quiet afternoon in my backyard. I was trimming the hedges when I heard it. Real, unfiltered laughter. I turned and saw the young couple who'd moved into Margot's old house chasing their toddler around a sprinkler. They were using their own hose. Their own yard. The kids squealed, the parents laughed, and for once, nothing was being stolen or regulated. That was the win. Not the revenge. Not the recognition. The real victory was peace. The return of a neighborhood where people respected each other's space, where the only thing spraying from a hose was water, not war. I turned the spigot. Let the hose come to life. And for the first time in a long time, I watered my tomato plant in silence. It finally felt like home again.